Happy Friday. Welcome to Master Fleet Integrated. I'm Amelie Schaefer. This is Janine Suvak, or over here. We were just talking about how the camera's backwards and I was trying to fix my hair, but I was like over on this side of my head, but it's this side. Anyway, so I was pointing, that's Janine. And we are Systematic Excellence Consulting. Businesses run more efficiently. We help them take an outside perspective on the internal operations. We help them build effective teams, train them, and help build that strong infrastructure to run more efficiently. And so we've been doing a series from a book by Mike Michalowicz called Fix This Next. He has a business hierarchy of needs, and we've been going through each of those steps in our podcast, the Systematic Excellence podcast, and picking out certain topics that we think need a little more attention. And then we've been working through those on Fridays. So today we had Ron Parisi on the podcast this week. Fantastic, from CPA on Fire. And we'll make sure we put the link to the full episode so you can listen to that, because there's definitely important. But we just wanted to pull out a couple of things that we wanted to talk about a little bit more in depth, because we felt like they were important to draw attention to. So
yeah, we're picking out a couple of things, but there are so many things in that episode. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to talk about cash reserves, which is the sometimes daunting, and as I like to call it, the easily pushed to the back burner topic. And so in terms of cash reserves, we want to talk about how to look at your business like an investor, how to be consistent with building up your cash reserves, and then the importance of starting in doing that. And so let's start the cash reserves and actually building it up, and then we'll talk about looking at your business like an investor. So something that we do is we run the profit first method in our business.
Sure.
And I think the importance of that is that we automatically start to build cash reserves, even if it's a small amount. But because we have our bookkeeper run that in our business, it's something that happens automatically. That percentage is just part of our bookkeeping process, and it's something that gets done in our business. And it's not like we don't feel like we're missing anything because it happens automatically. We always get paid. There's money that always goes to operating expenses, and our cash reserves is always getting built up. Even if it's small, it's something.
There's always money getting set aside for taxes, always.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you haven't read Profit First, I do highly recommend reading it. And if you have a bookkeeper, and I would assume that they would be aware of it. If not, I would highly recommend that they are. I think that it is the most effective way to manage the money in your business. So many startups, so many new businesses fail because the person that started the business doesn't pay themselves. And one of the things that Janine and I do is we get paid first. It happens. We get paid no matter what. Like, we're always taking something, even if it's not as much as the month before. Like, we get paid, right? And then all of our operating expenses get paid, but we don't skip getting paid. And I feel like that's a really important thing. And then we always have money that. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, the idea behind that is that the trap that early startups find themselves in is they take every last cent and they're reinvesting it in the growth of their business. And of course, you want to invest in the growth of your business, but if you never pay yourself, that's a bad habit. How are you going to pay your own bills? It's kind of the point of having a business in the first place, right? Otherwise, it's a money churning hobby. If you're not paying yourself, and you really need to start, because if you don't start with it at the beginning, when are you going to start?
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense not to.
Right. Exactly. And so as far as the cash reserves, we have something called the vault. I named it that. But that's like where we save, that's like our squirrel away money, right? Like, that's like where we put our little acorns and we squirrel them away. But we know that there's a cushion, and that cushion, even if it's a little bit, is constantly getting something into that account every time our bookkeeper is, reconciling accounts and paying us and moving our money around. So that happens twice a month. And so I think that's just a really important thing. And so to remain consistent, in my opinion, the best way to do it is it becomes part of your process. It becomes part of your bookkeeping process. Whether you do your bookkeeping on your own or you pay someone to do it, it just is the process. Like there's percentages. So we have money that comes into an income account, and then there's percentages for each of the accounts, like for our pay account, for our operating expenses, for our taxes, and for our vault. Everything has a percentage, and it just gets split out and it goes there. So even on months when we are a little slower, there's still something going to every one of those accounts. Like there's not one that gets skipped or missed or whatever. And so we're consistently putting money in. So
Yeah, it's all
obviously,
percentage based. So as revenue varies,
exactly.
regardless of which way it's trending, there's always money going to these.
Right. And so that gives us sort of a security to know that, like, if something happens, we are able to cover, we're able to cover that because we have the cash reserves in the vault. We have the vault that keeps getting, the money put into it. And one account that I forgot to mention was the profit account. So there's another percentage. That's also like we get a bonus once a quarter from the profit account. So all of those accounts are part of the profit first method that we use in our business. But we have the security to know that, like, if we get in a tight spot, we have this vault that can pay us, or it can pay for operating expenses or something like that. Like if we need more money, if there's something, we have this to fall back on. And when we don't need it, we don't use it and it sits there, but it allows us to have some flexibility in uncertain times.
Absolutely. It's it's interesting to see how. So back in the day when I got out of the service and started a medical practice, I was not aware of profit first or this method of doing things. But in building my practice, as in order to reinvest in it, because I was in that now I paid myself, but but because the equipment that I need, it's like, how do you step upwards? There's sending patients out for services, there's renting equipment, and then when you own it, of course, you have the biggest profit margin on the services you're providing. And so I was because medical equipment is really expensive, I was in the habit of setting aside money for the equipment that I wanted to invest in. And then, like 2 years into it is when I got really debilitated from that toxic chemical exposure while I was in Iraq, and I ended up having to sell my practice. So it wasn't part of my plan. It was totally unexpected. As far as I was concerned, I was still in startup mode, with the
Right.
rapid early growth of my practice, and found that I had to sell it. But because I had that constant setting money aside, it was a much more viable practice to sell, even in the stage that it was, because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good transition. So let's talk about how to look at your business like an investor, right? So how do you do that? What perspective or things do you need to consider when looking at your business like an investor? And why
Well,
is it important to do that?
Well, I mean, for starters, the one I just threw out there has to do with that thing that nobody ever plans for, which is the emergency, right?
Right.
I mean, as an investor, I mean, think about it. If you are going to invest in a company, are you going to invest in a company that the owner can't even pay themselves? It's like, that's just a straight no-go on top of that, just right out the gate. So these stages of growth, it's like, first of all, is it a profitable business? And it's not a profitable business if the owner's not getting paid. And then what are its cash reserves? Because there's always, when you're purchasing a business, there, in that transition period, there's always, you have to factor in some unknowns. They call it goodwill when you're buying a business, and the actual value of that is really rather tenuous. So but the cash reserves are very concrete. The size of the audience for the email list, the actual sales that have been going on, the things that are more, money is tangible, and that's really what business is all about. So it definitely makes your business more valuable to have that than not.
Yeah. I think the other thing to consider is, can the business run without the business owner? I mean, that's something that we
Mm-hmm.
continually talk about as far as operations, because that's where we specialize, is in setting businesses up to be able to run on their own without the business owner being like, in the operations. And I think that's another factor too. I mean, if you're thinking about buying a business, unless you want the responsibility of like being in all of it, that'd be different. But I think if I'm going to invest in a business, I want it to be able to run on its own. Like, of course, there's probably going to need to be changes or, things like that. But if it's only staying alive because the business owner, the CEO is doing like managing the operations, running the day to day, doing all those things, it really would put that, it wouldn't, to me, unless it's like deciding if you want to buy like the house that you need to fix up or if you're buying a house that's already nice and ready to move in, right? So it depends on like you trying to buy a fixer upper or are you trying to buy a house that's ready for you to move in. So I think that is depending on what you're looking at, and what you're looking for, that's what you would need to consider. But in my opinion, it's important to think of it like they're going to want those operations to be working and running on their own. I think it's important to take the look or the perspective of the investor for so many reasons. I just want to add that really quick. I know you're about to say something, but taking the perspective of the investor, what it allows you to do is take an objective look at your business. And I think that's so important, not just for cash reserves, but for everything, right? Like, look at it like, okay, if I had someone, would they look at my business and want to buy it? And if not, like, that's a good indicator that you probably need to make some changes.
Especially if you wouldn't buy your own business.
Right.
That's a big red flag.
Right. What were you going to say? I know you were going to say
what I was going to say was just, especially in the online space, some of the terms that are tossed out there that, that everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people strive for is of evergreen or turnkey or passive income. And it's like, really, it's like, those are not 100% ever. Right. It's like, even if you have the best product and the best marketing campaign, there's fatigue, there's ad fatigue, right? There's constantly changes and updating that needs to be made to whatever kind of business you have going on. But what we're talking about is by taking yourself out. So it's not to say that it doesn't need some kind of attention or management to continue running. Otherwise, the revenue that it's generating will ultimately taper off to nothing. But the type of care and feeding that it needs doesn't have to come from you.
Right. And that you're there to do the forward looking and the projections and the quarterly planning and the
you can even replace that, but
if you don't
it has
want
to be in place.
Right. It has to be in place. Now, if you can replace that, if you're looking to be that role in the business, then that's what you'd be looking for, to take on a business that needs someone to do that. Now, if you're looking to just buy it and have someone else run it completely, that's fine too. But as taking the perspective of the investor, it allows you just to take that step back and really look at the full picture of the business and, where you can take a critical look and make some changes on, okay, how can my business run even more efficiently? And where can I do better? Where can I, like if you don't have a way of putting aside money for cash reserves, once a month or whatever, however you process your bookkeeping, that might be a good place to start, right? Like not just for an investor, but just for you in general as the business owner to have some security in your business and being able to have a backup plan if something happens.
And I always like to touch on, the practicals of what does that look like, right? So even if you're starting really small, where it's like, the things you see, the equivalent in just your daily life, the rounding up the cents on purchases. And there are apps that can help you with all these. I would, especially in your business, you should be reviewing your finances and the things that you're paying for. In the online space, what happens all the time is like subscription services. Are you really using those? Can you do the annual plan next year and save money on that? Take that savings and roll it into your cash reserves because you weren't using it. You're accustomed to paying that subscription plan. Other things that we review that change a lot, cell phone and insurance plans. They're constantly putting out new products.
Yep.
What about as your cash reserves grow? What kind of returns are you getting in your bank account, right? The bigger it gets, the more you can do with the money. So revising that helps the compounding effect as well. And just being mindful of it, pay attention to it instead of turning, a lot of people just don't want to look at that. But even starting small, I love some of the like investor apps that you use.
Yeah, like Stash and Acorns, where they do the rounding up for you. If you purchase things with their card, then they automatically round up, the cents to the next dollar, and then invest it for you. And yeah, it's super helpful.
Yeah, there's
Now,
so many great tools for rolling that over.
right, and having this brings us back to something we've talked about before, but having a bookkeeper be in charge of those things. Like, if that is not your specialty, if that is not your zone of genius, if it's not where you love to live doing those things, you need to hire someone to do it. And having a bookkeeper, do those things for you is really important, because it's getting done, and that they're doing it and they understand it, and that is their zone of genius. And it's important. I mean, I cannot stress enough the importance of having a good bookkeeper. And we've interviewed our bookkeeper, Chris, on our podcast. She's fantastic. I know a lot of other bookkeepers. It's just so important to have someone that understands those things, and you gets it off your plate. If that's not somewhere where if it's stressful for you to spend time there, it's better just to hand it off to someone that does it and knows it and actually
and
enjoys
they love
doing
it.
Right.
They love doing it.
Right. And then and they're just as invested in your business as you are. And if you feel I mean, I have all the confidence in the world that Chris is just as invested in our business and the success of it as we are. Like, I don't question that. And so I know that she's taking
If you
care
don't
of
get
our
that
money
vibe from your
because
bookkeeper, you need a different bookkeeper.
it's not a good fit. Yeah. And the having the cash reserves is just this like comfort of knowing that, like, okay, if shit hits the fan, like, we're gonna be fine. I mean, we won't be fine forever, because it's not like, of course, like, we have to work. We're working on ourselves and working on our own business and all of that. And we wouldn't be fine for a long time. But I know that, like, we would be fine in a pinch if we needed to, either pay ourselves, if we didn't have enough money, but we could pay our team, or we could pay our operating expenses. Like, we could pull that money and pay for things if we didn't have the money to do that. Like, we have that, and it's just really nice to know and have that, and of course we need to get better at it, or we need to improve, but we at least have
it.
something.
Yeah, it also gives you a straight competitive advantage. And now, it's like where we are in 2020 with COVID-19 and the economy being what it is. It's like you can see the companies that have the cash reserves are, as always happens in economic downturns, is they are, aggressively investing in increasing their market share. So it's not just a survival tool, right? It can be a growth tool in difficult times.
Yeah, and it allows us to make decisions, right? Easier, because we can quickly look at our money and make a decision. Excuse me. We can make a decision about purchases almost immediately, because we know our numbers, because our bookkeeper gives us our numbers. We know what we have in cash reserves, and we can make a decision like, okay, are we willing to take the money out of cash reserves to make this decision? No? Okay, cool. Then don't. But we can make quick decisions like, okay, yes, this purchase is worth pulling that money from the reserves and purchasing on it. And, we've either come up with a plan on how to get the ROI or whatever, but because we have that, and because we have the flexibility of the cash reserves, we're able to make decisions quickly without a whole lot of stress and back and forth and this and that. Like, we can make the decision, just say, yes, let's do it. We know we can afford it and we can do it.
Yeah, we don't like stressing over decisions.
No. We got other shit to stress about.
That's right.
So we hope that you found that helpful. Jenny, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
That's all I had.
We think it's super important. If you have questions or you have any comments, please leave them, in the comments. I'll put the link to the episode with Ron
Yeah, catch
Parisi.
the podcast. Ron
Yeah, it's
Parisi is
really, really
amazing.
great.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good.
So I'll put that link in there, and if you're struggling with figuring out where you need to move in your business next, what do you need to focus on? Where does your attention need to be? We've been going through this whole series of the business hierarchy of needs. And so if you go back to the podcast again, I'll put that link in the comments, but we've worked through each of those steps with experts that share on it and provide a lot of value in those interviews, along with all the lives that we've done. But if you're still feeling kind of stuck, we'll put the link to the quiz that we have that you can take that'll help you kind of narrow that down. And then Janine and I are both certified advisors for Fix This Next. And so, what we can do is if you need an outside support, we can provide that to you. And so, we'll also include the link to book a call with us if you're looking for outside support on how to determine what the next best step in your business is. That's our zone of genius, and that's where we work, and we can support you in that. So we hope that you enjoyed this. We hope that you found it helpful. Again, listen to the full interview in the podcast. It's really, really valuable. And we will see you next week.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.